Ladies and gentlemen, hi, my name is Nicolas Zanetos. I am the digital channels manager and a journalist at Alpha TV Cyprus, and I have the honor today to host here at the Delphi Economic Forum the US Ambassador in Nicosia, Mrs. Τζούλι Φίσερ. Welcome.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you. It's a pleasure to do this together. Thank you.
Our discussion will focus on the role of Cyprus in the Middle East,
Okay.
The Eastern Mediterranean, the Cyprus-US bilateral relations, their future, and hopefully we'll have enough time to cover some other issues as well.
Okay.
Before that, I would like you to share with us, from the eyes of an American diplomat, how you imagine your duties and life in Cyprus and how they actually developed the last 2 years.
Well, thank you, Nicholas. And let me just start by saying that for me, it's such a pleasure to be back at Delphi. This is the second time I've come to this conference, and I always find it is just so full of rich and interesting conversations. And so it's really a pleasure to be here and to take part. And to be able to find so many people who are interested in thinking about Cyprus and what's happening and how the situation in Cyprus is developing, I think, in lots of interesting ways. In terms of how I have found myself in Cyprus, I will tell you what I am struck by most is just the breadth of opportunity I have found in this relationship. It is not always the case that when a new ambassador lands that really, you know, the doors just open in terms of opportunity to grow and stretch and find new avenues of cooperation between governments. But that has absolutely been the case. In my 14 months that I have been in Cyprus, I have found it is, of course, a very enjoyable place to live. It is a challenging environment. There is so much going on. There has been so much going on in the region, so much going on in the island. But these are all challenges and opportunities for us to put the relationship to work. And I think as a diplomat, that's what we're all looking for.
Cyprus sits in a very sensitive region. It's been discussed all day long today. Even Cypriots, sometimes they forget that they are privileged to live in a safe environment, in a democratic and prosperous country.
Yes.
A few miles away, though, in Gaza, we have an ongoing conflict that is already a tragedy from all aspects. What is the US position right now on how we end this crisis?
So let me start where you started, which is, you know, how Cyprus is positioned. It's not just the geography, right? It is the position of the government, of Christodoulides and his team, and many in the parliament, many of the parties who share a vision for Cyprus's role as a place that is contributing to solving problems. I think about the role Cyprus has been playing in terms of civilian resilience, building civilian resilience. And, you know, this time last year, when I think I was in exactly this room, we were talking about what Cyprus was doing in support of the citizens of more than 20 nations who were fleeing Sudan, right? And how Cyprus was positioned to support those. And then very quickly, you know, it's only several months later that we see the tragic events of October 7, the horrific attacks that were perpetrated against the citizens of Israel, and then the conflict which has ensued. But we spent many of these months working absolutely hand in hand with the Republic of Cyprus to plan for, to prepare for the potential evacuation of tens of thousands of citizens out of Lebanon. And that's not possible. It is not possible for us to think about, you know, in my case, the evacuation of American citizens without the incredibly active role that Cyprus plays in thinking about how to protect civilians in a crisis. So it was no surprise. It was no surprise to me. It was no surprise to Washington that President Christodoulides put forward the Amalthea plan. And, you know, in those early days in November, when, you know, this first became part of the discussion, you know, there was, I think, a tremendous amount of skepticism about not about the value of such a maritime corridor to bring humanitarian assistance in, to contribute additional humanitarian assistance to the major routes.
People laughed on the feasibility of the whole project.
But what I think President Christodoulidis understood was that, there was no nation, including my own, that could do this alone, right? The United States of America, as many resources as we will bring to this, as many resources as we are bringing to this, including the provision of this floating pier system that is going to allow for the delivery into Gaza. No nation can do this alone, not the United States, not the European Union, not any one nation. And so the vision of the kind of coalition to bring it together, really, President Christodoulidis deserves a tremendous amount of credit for this work. We are very hopeful that we're going to see this humanitarian assistance getting in to people who are in such desperate need before this month is over. The first elements of the pier are arriving now, and when I say that, I mean the United States military is hard at work making sure that it will be ready to go as quickly as possible because the need is so urgent. So you also asked a little bit about, how do we bring an end to this conflict? Well, I do think the last panel, spent a lot of time perhaps on this question, but President Biden and Secretary Blinken have been so very clear about what it is the United States sees and what it is we expect. We have been supportive of Israel's right to defend its state and its citizens since the moment of the attacks. What we have are some differences of views in terms of how that defense should occur this many months in. Our focus on protecting civilians in Gaza is, I think, very clear, and our push to ensure that the protection of civilians is of the highest priority to the Israeli military as they continue to go after the terrorists responsible and those holding the hostages. We need to see the hostages released. I think we have to all be very clear about it. The release of remaining hostages is absolutely essential. And it is important, I think, always to remember that in a democracy, the people of Israel are so focused on that hostage return, and it seems to me it is going to be very difficult for us to see a cessation of fighting without the release of those hostages.
And I've been hearing since morning about this new order that needs to be decided in the Middle East. A new security system in the region. Could Cyprus play a role in this, since it's already contributing with a humanitarian maritime zone?
What I have seen and what I've observed is just how active a role Cyprus plays as the European Union member state that is a foot in the Middle East, right? A foot in Europe, a foot in the Middle East. And the relationships that Cyprus has that are decades in the making, I think there is an incredibly important role for Cyprus. And I know that the world looks different from the geography of Cyprus. And so from my perspective, these are relationships that really can contribute to that, in the last panel, as I caught the last 10 minutes of it, it was really focused on, are we going to be building towards a more stable Middle East, or are we going to let others move it in a different direction? And I think if we are going to build towards that stability, I absolutely see Cyprus playing a role in that.
It seems that the last couple of years, American and Cypriot authorities cooperated well in order to clean Cyprus's banking system from mainly from Russian shady accounts, and more recently to effectively implement sanctions. It was announced that an FBI team came to Cyprus to support these efforts. How is this cooperation working so far? So,
it's really interesting to me to see just how much this cooperation has grown. Again, I'll go back to sort of my arrival, which coincides with President Christodoulidis coming into office. There was work that had been done previously, which has really enabled the growth of what we are doing now. As of last summer, we had no full-time FBI presence in Cyprus. And now, you're right, we have a resident agent, we have a larger team at work, and what we have seen is a real desire to think about how we can help bring more cases to prosecute, how Cyprus can bring more cases to prosecution, right? Because that's the goal, is to prosecute in Cyprus. And to take a look and see, are there institutional impediments that are getting in the way of investigations that can be addressed in whatever appropriate channel there is. The level of cooperation and coordination with the authorities is, I think, exceptional, and I can compare it to 28 years as a diplomat and say it is truly a unique partnership in this way. And what I see is a real desire by the authorities to reverse a lingering reputation, right? And to ensure that Cyprus is seen as a trusted banking partner. And these are difficult decisions. I recognize this. I know how hard it is. I recognize that the decision to deny Russian ships access to Cypriot ports, that was a very difficult decision. And so I think it's important that on the United States part, that the presence of our Navy and the presence of our ships is something that we need to make sure is visible, not just to the authorities and not just to representatives of the National Guard or the Chief of Defense, but that Cypriots understand that American presence is on the island and that it's not as if the West, in asking Cyprus to deny this access, it isn't making up for it in other ways. And I think the more success that Cyprus has in changing that reputation, I think there is a natural magnet that Cyprus has for being a trusted banking partner when there is a sense that the money that is moving around the island is not contributing to fueling the Kremlin's war and supporting oligarchs and their assets. And so, again, I will just tell you, this work is of such importance as we look at the conflict, as we look at the war that Russia is waging against Ukraine. The work to cut off those the shell companies, the assets, those financial flows, it's simply critical, and we know that it's working. We know that it is having an impact on the Russians' ability to recruit, to buy equipment. We know that it has that impact.
2024 marks 50 years since the illegal invasion of Turkey in Cyprus, and the island remains divided in a very sensitive region, as we said before. How do you see the prospects for restarting negotiations? Mainly, people will say we are not so optimistic about it. We are getting the sense that the Americans are not that interested in these efforts so far. I would like you to comment on this.
Look, the United States of America has been invested in a comprehensive settlement agreement for Cyprus for decades. And our engagement on this in the context of the Security Council, our commitment to the Security Council's resolutions to a bizonal, bicommunal federation with political equality has remained absolutely unchanged, and that commitment endures. What I think is important right now, right? We have a UN envoy at work, and I think that an envoy of this nature, right, the Secretary General's envoy, she needs space, right? Like, she needs space to find the common ground. Like, that is her task. Is there common ground that is sufficient to bring the parties back to the negotiating table? And I'll tell you, I do think that work is done best quietly, right, in quiet conversations. And so, you know, for our part, you know, we remain focused on every opportunity to bring people from across the island together, to find those issues where we think there's particularly productive areas of common interest. And there are a lot. There are a lot of issues. When I talk with Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, there are many issues that you know, I find people are focused on that echo each other. And I hear so many people talk about how hungry they are for that comprehensive settlement agreement. And at the same time, it's not the only thing we're doing on the island, right? The relationship we have with the Republic of Cyprus is bigger and broader than any one challenge or one issue. And so what I think is important is that the more we do together, whether it is the work we're doing between the National Guard of Cyprus and the state of New Jersey's National Guard in the new state partnership program that we have, whether it's the work we're doing in educational channels, right? Like, all of this is aimed towards Cypriots knowing us better and us knowing Cypriots better. And I think the more we do that, the more we understand the dynamics on the island, the better partner we are for contributing to those next steps, to hopefully the resumption of negotiations. We were very supportive of getting an envoy back to work. And, you know, the question to me consistently comes back to what are the representatives of the two communities? What are they willing to do if they want to move forward? And that has to be a big part of what we consider.
I will insist, though. Do you see a way forward, having in mind that the Greek Cypriot side says we want to restart negotiations from the point they were disrupted in 2017. The other side talks about two-state solution, sovereign equality.
Right.
How do we bridge these two positions, and how do we find common ground?
Right. I think this is very much the work that the envoy is engaged in, right? Is trying to find where are the shades of difference. And look, I think in diplomatic discussions, right, like, that is the challenge that we have, is, you know, understanding there are publicly staked out positions, but often, you know, in a quiet conversation over a cup of coffee where maybe the press isn't there, right? We find that there's shades of interest, or we find that there's an ability to think about where these interests are going to overlap. And so that's the challenge that we face. I don't want to sit here and declare myself optimist or anything else. I generally lean towards the optimistic side of most issues, because I believe we can make a difference when we really work at it. This is a very challenging set of issues. As you note, the 50th anniversary is coming up this year. And, you know, I am very hopeful that we will have something positive to look forward to rather than merely looking backwards.
An American company discovered Cyprus's first natural gas reserve back in 2011. Even though there have been other discoveries as well by powerful companies such as ExxonMobil, Eni, Total, still the natural gas sits at the bottom of the sea.
Yes.
And do you think that there are geopolitical reasons why, in an era that everyone tries to find cheap energy, we have natural gas not exploited so far?
Look, the extraction of these resources it's obviously critical. It's obviously critical for Europe's energy security. And, you know, the timeline, I know, is one that has frustrated, you know, citizens of Cyprus. It has frustrated the companies involved in many cases. It has frustrated, I think, a number of government officials. But in order to see these projects yield the results that people are looking for, to contribute to Europe's energy security at a very important time, what we have to see are plans that make sense all around, right? And those plans have to work, first and foremost, for the citizens of Cyprus as represented by the government. They have to work for the for-profit companies that are involved in the extraction. And they, have to suit all of our regulatory and climate, our regulatory requirements and our climate goals at the same time. And so, the challenge I see is, it is, as the industries have changed, as as ministers have come and gone, as we've seen elections impact these questions, there really is, I think, a focus currently, at least when I am talking with the American companies involved, there's a real focus on having a plan and sticking to it, right? That's what's going to mean that these resources get to market the most quickly. And I genuinely see that this is really what has been the stumbling block or the obstacle, has been sort of developing a plan that everyone involved will stick to. That's what will move us forward.
And finally, I would like you to tell us what lies ahead when it comes to the bilateral relations between Cyprus and the United States. Mm-hmm. What should we expect? Is there a project for you that you work on it right now?
Do you have something specific you're asking me about?
No.
Or you, okay, all right.
I'm just fishing.
Yes, just fishing. All right. Well, look, we are working on so many different aspects of the relationship that I am incredibly optimistic about. It is not just the military-to-military cooperation that we have had underway, which I think yields incredible benefits to both Cyprus and to the United States. It's not just the work that we're doing in the law enforcement channels, which is so critical, but it is some of these people-to-people efforts. It's about thinking about how we can get more Cypriots into universities in the United States and how we can get more Americans to Cyprus to study in universities in Cyprus. It's about how we're going to make travel easier for Americans and Cypriots. And first and foremost, when I think about that, I think about whether we're going to be able to make the progress that we're all aiming for when it comes to getting Cyprus into the visa waiver program.
When that's
We are doing everything we can to make it as soon as possible, honestly. There's a tremendous team in the President's office that is leading this effort because there's a lot of very technical requirements. There are 3 member states of the European Union that are not in the visa waiver program yet. Cyprus is really on the cusp of meeting so many of the requirements. They are technical, they are detailed, these are a lot of lawyers involved, but I am really hopeful that with a concerted push by everyone involved, and so this is my opportunity. Anybody who's in this room who is from Cyprus, if you need a visa to the United States, right now is the time for you to apply, and it will be helpful to us in this effort. So.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nicholas.